always the same desire. Make my nose smaller. Why do you think your nose has to be smaller? Like everyone was getting taller and skinnier, and I was just getting chubbier and shorter. Like I wasn't going anywhere, and it. Hi guys, welcome to another video on May in Bloom. I hope you're well. So for those of you who are new here, my name is May. I talk about all things holistic decolonial living from a womanistic perspective. I love sharing my efforts in all of those endeavors, like slow living, intentional living, mindful living. I'm also the creator of Bloom Baby Bloom Studios, where I make art inspired by the things that inspire my life or ground my way of living, for an eco print shop. So no waste, no nothing, only things that you want, get created with the best conditions I've found so far in print on demand. So do check it out if you like the things I talk about and you want art for your house, a little tote bag, a little gift, whatever. Otherwise, welcome to another video on May in Bloom. Today, we're going to be having a little soul talk. This is a conversation I think I would have really loved to have heard when I was younger. I've lived through a few things that you thought were life-ending when you were younger, and then you continued living. So I think it's a great space to be in and to share from, basically. And it makes me also excited about getting older, because I know I'll hopefully only get wiser and have more perspective and have more tools to live life from, basically. So this might be like one of the longer talks, so get yourself something to drink, settle down. I feel like in recent years, especially as somebody who considers herself a bit of like an amateur digital anthropologist, in the beginning of YouTube, like in the beginning of influencer culture, in the beginning of social media, there was a time where first, like, people were just naturally maybe beautiful or just themselves, and there wasn't a lot of expectation of how you look on YouTube, because YouTube or digital media wasn't that serious. There was TV, there was all of this stuff that was like there. That's what people did if they were part of Hollywood. That's what people did when they were part of this part of society. It felt like the digital space was more accommodating in some way, for people to be more themselves. But then like the two worlds kind of meshed up and they infused into one. And the people who were on YouTube were hanging out with people in Hollywood and vice versa. And the expectations, with more money coming in, more opportunities coming in, also changed. So then a lot of people who maybe you grew up like thinking that, oh, I love the digital space more because I feel like it's more personal. I feel like I can connect more to people. I feel like it's more real. Then with the infusion of these two worlds together, you infuse a bit of capitalism in there, and the values obviously change because there's a lot of money to be made in digital spaces, and a lot of it like was based on sponsorship or partnerships or even people clicking to watch your videos. So beauty, especially as a female content creator, became very important, and the standard just kept getting higher and higher as the quality improved. The values also shifted in how you should look or how you should be or what's the intent of creating online and how you should show up. I've never been a makeup girly, but I've watched and consumed lots of makeup videos just because I like it. As I would really say, like, as an art form, like, I think it's impressive what people can do. I think it's beautiful. I think it's gorgeous. But then it went from a place of, okay, this is how I do my everyday look, to then it became like everybody has to have full glam. I really was into like Real Housewives or these kinds of reality TV. I just love it. It's also another place where I get to see people and how they interact in different spaces. And I think my purpose on earth is I just want to observe. I like to take in a lot of things and then I want to digest it, and then it makes me see the world differently, understand the world differently. I loved watching Real Housewives. There were a lot of like touching, moving stories in there, but like one thing that I saw that shocked me, but it slowly like started being part of the show, was you would see that people had like this glam team, and being naive as I was, I didn't know that people needed all of these people to make them look the way they did. I thought they were just really maybe naturally that good looking or that flawless, and then because like I said, like it's an art form, so you can really make it look natural. But then I started seeing, okay, they have to have an entire team for them to look a certain way. And then I started seeing that on digital spaces, that more and more YouTubers or more and more channels were like featuring people who do a lot, like they have a glam makeup on. And then that kind of became the norm. And then I started seeing it outside in the street, like people going to school or to work in what I thought before was like real housewife makeup or glam team makeup. But now it became the norm. And I think that's why it's so interesting to be a woman, because the levels of what is an acceptable, well maintained woman, just the list just kept getting longer and demands higher and higher, and the prices also higher and higher. And especially as a Black woman, because already as Black women there's a lot that we've normalized having to do just to feel presentable. I remember like when there was the whole conversation around how Black women were not supposed to go outside with their bonnets or their scarves on their head. But then at the same time, you had a lot of white women who were even seen as charming going out with their messy buns. Like it became like this cute little quirky thing. But the maintenance demands on Black women is really high, because most of the time we're trying to appeal to eyes and gazes and values that have nothing of us in mind, like that have no consideration for our well-being. No, like we're always trying to prove in many ways like our humanity, our femininity. I feel like that's the case, especially if you consume a lot of Western media, particularly Northern American media. It takes time before it trickles down all the way. But I remember walking on the streets of Copenhagen, which is where I lived before, and seeing that that was the norm. Like more and more girls were wearing and feeling the pressure, white girls mostly, but like feeling the pressure to have like a fully beat face. Like you couldn't go outside and without looking a certain way. And then I started seeing that the demands on how to look this way were reaching younger and younger girls. So you'd see it on Real Housewives, and then you started seeing it in women like early 20s, mid 20s, and then you started seeing it on teenagers, and then you started seeing it on and then you're like, hold up. I remember somebody I watch periodically here and there, but she has some really fun takes, so she's very passionate about what she talks about, so it's very engaging. But she was basically talking about how it was insane that we were seeing women who went outside without makeup as brave. And most of these women were also celebrities who had still access maybe to amazing products and dermatologists and what have you. But this idea that they were brave for sharing who they are naturally. We don't call men brave for going out looking how they were born to look like. That's why also I believe in like holistic decolonization, because it kind of also takes an intersectional approach basically. And I feel like when you think about it, especially as a Black woman, already as a woman, like even if you're white, like this demands of how good looking you're supposed to be, or what presentable looks like. And in so many ways, a lot of Black women end up also adapting those notions to some degree. Before, like painting your nails or doing your nails, like we would do it here and there, like for a fun event, what have you, but it wasn't a requirement. And then girls started doing their nails, but maybe it was like the color red or like see-through, right? And then suddenly acrylic nails started blowing up. And actually, I would say that Michelle Phan, at least that was the first person who I heard about. I remember she was doing an interview like a long time ago. And she was being asked, like, what do you think the next trend is? Like, because that was at the height of the makeup boom, right? And she was like, nail art. She really pipped it. Like, that was so cool, because exactly that, like, people then started feeling like as a woman, like to be a feminine woman, you have to get your nails done and they have to be like professionally manicured. It just gets more and more expensive, takes more and more. It's like a distraction that just never ends. Don't get me wrong, like there's some things that maybe are enjoyable here and there. If you love the whole routine, if it really makes sense to you, I'm happy for you. But a lot of people end up feeling like that's what you have to do, and that's the thing that I like to put more light on, that there's nothing that you don't have to do your hair like that. You don't have to do your nails. You don't have to feel like you have to put on so much makeup just to exist, just to feel like, okay, even eyelashes. I remember like that was also shocking, because we were in the era of mascara, right? Like people were starting to make mascara, and that was already big. And then it came to be the norm that you need to add false eyelashes in order to really be done. It's like the standard gets higher and higher and higher. And there's another thing I want to talk about that's maybe more of an Ubuntu May video, where I want to talk about, like, I feel like a lot of the standard is also really mimicking drag culture. I don't know. I don't know if that's wild to say. So drag culture is made of like men mimicking women, making a character of women, and then they do shows, and like this is found in a lot of cultures, even in Ugandan culture. No, they've never called it drag because Uganda is very homophobic. But there's a lot of humor of men dressing up as Ugandan women, maybe like Nigerian men dressing up as Nigerian women, and there's comedy in that, like men pretending to be women is very funny. Apparently, we've all accepted that. I also feel like drag culture kind of then influences the opposite way again. And then when you see the bodies of women, the BBLs and what have you, it's also very mimicking of drag culture. And I also think that that's also quite related to when you study a lot about fashion industry and history, and how a lot of it was influenced by gay men. There was a lot of gay white men in the industry, like when we're talking like big fashion houses, and the way they designed for women were not from the same way like a man, like let's say heterosexual man or bisexual men would design for women, but these were men that saw women as, it's like if lesbians were designing for men. Even though I think that lesbians, by being raised as women, have a different understanding because they're still raised under patriarchy, whereas gay men, like sometimes the way they see women is even more objectifying, but it's allowed because they don't want to have sex with you. It's a big story. Anyway, so like how that influenced like the obsession with thinness, because they liked women that looked very androgynous, very as little as the average woman as possible. Gay men were not in the fashion industry, were not there to celebrate particularly like all the beauty that women come in, because they didn't see even women like maybe as particularly beings. They saw them as part of an extension, like you would design for a mannequin, you know. Anyway, there's something big there, but I think I would feel more comfortable talking about it if I did more research. So there's all these changes that you see over time, and then you see how people start with surgery, right? And at the beginning, like surgery was this thing where like people were ashamed of and they hid, and we knew like celebrities were doing it, but you didn't think your girlfriends would be doing it. And then Botox became a thing, and people were still doing it in secret, like it was still shameful. But then it became this thing that was like very praised, very normal, don't think about it. And then the other surgeries started showing up. I get a lot of surgery or like surgeon clinic content on my YouTube and my Instagram. Like I like transformation. I'll watch somebody landscaping. Like I like befores and afters. I'm just that kind of person. Whether it's like your personal growth, whether it's cleaning, whether it's organizing, whether it's your hair. Like I just love before and after. I always end up watching like somebody who's had a nose job, and my brain is like, I want to see how much better it looks, you know. And then like I started seeing all these black women going to Asia to get their nose done. For some reason that content came up on my feed, maybe because I watch a lot of Lauryn Hill. She really took away a lot of the stigma on surgery, and I think for the most part we are all very, if it really makes you happier, like why not? But I think in that approach we are also like ignoring the pressure that we have around us for people to go more that route than accepting themselves. There's a lot of money in you not accepting yourself, in you feeling there's so much you have to do to just exist or have the right to exist or venture out into the world and feel like you will be respected or feel like you'll be accepted. Those degrees of work you have to put in, like labor you have to put in, increases depending on your personal intersectionality. I feel like that's what makes this really important to talk about, because growing up, I think we just saw the beauty standards change and shift, and at some point you think like, okay, we're going towards more acceptance of fuller bodies, but then that weirdly goes into the realm of BBLs, and then you're like, oh, okay, now body positivity is important, which is like love your body and embrace your body. But then that also ventured into all bodies are good and healthy bodies, which I think like anybody should have no shame, and you should have no sense of unworthiness, because whatever body that your spirit occupies, it always like shifts to the other extreme. And it's like, no, you can also be healthy and unhealthy depending on your body type. It can be an indicator of that. Whether you have a lot of fat or not at all, like your eating habits, your reasons for eating the way you eat, these things have consequences and they do matter, but you should never feel ashamed of yourself or where you are in your body, or you should, like, that doesn't make sense either. But I think in wanting to undo one arm, we like flip to the opposite side, but then we do more harm on the other side, right? Like embracing your natural beauty, but then also shaming people maybe who need or wanted to do something about their body. Or getting to a place where, like, yeah, as long as it makes you happy, like, people should be allowed to have these procedures. And then we don't take into account we live in a world that thrives off women's insecurities. So there's going to be more women that feel like, okay, it's more accepted. Not that shaming them would help, but we're not balancing that with how to accept how you look and how to enjoy growing into your body rather than changing it. Like kids that change their body at 16 and 15, that's insane to me, because you don't know how you're going to feel about your body when you're in your 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s. And I think in all the conversations of all the things you can do to, okay, accept where you are, or accepting that you are allowed to change your body, whether it's through makeup, whether it's through surgeries or what have you, I think there has to be conversation about how important it is to go through the discomfort and the way you feel about your body as a woman in our society and getting to the other side without changing something, and how empowering that is. I say that because I grew up in a body that I really, really disliked. I had a lot of issues with my body. I suffered from eating disorders. When I think about my life and I think about my journey with my body and how far I've come with accepting and loving my body, and I think about, if, let's say I grew up in a society where from a young age, let's say not only I knew about all these procedures you could do, but that I had also the money and access to them, I think a lot of stuff I would have done. I have this conversation with my friends and people at my age, and I think about, oh my God, we're worried about the kids, especially if you're a black woman raised in Europe, for example. Like, so you have also the fact that you have no representation, your body's growing in all the weird ways, your body and features are not seen as attractive, and as a young girl, like, that really impacts you. But also you add healing from childhood trauma and how that also really alters the way you see your body and the love or hate you have for your body. And all of that just is a great cocktail when you add it to a world that wants women to not like who they are, not love who they are, and feel like they need to buy their way into worthiness. Add that to a world that benefits from women not loving who they are and not accepting who they are, and feeling like, if I get this next cream, if I get this next foundation, if I get this next goal weight-wise, or even when we went into like fitness era where women were like, I'm not gonna buy it, I'm gonna build it, even that got to a toxic place. Like, there's always something you need to do before you can get access to fully loving and accepting yourself. And as much as we were talking about like self-love, self-care, even the self-care, self-love, slowly that moved into buying things. Capitalism snuck its hand in there. So I'm really short. I know you can't tell. I'm really short. I'm like 155 centimeters, which I think is like 5'1" or 5'2" in the weird measurements that a lot of you guys use, but I'm 155, 157 on my passport, but I don't know. And I'm only shrinking, only getting shorter. But there was a part of me when I was in school and everybody started shooting up and I was just shooting horizontal, that really made me feel a certain way about myself. And especially growing up in a white environment, like, it didn't help. Like, everybody was getting taller and skinnier, and I was just getting chubbier and shorter. Like, I wasn't going anywhere, and it really affected me to the point where I was researching like how to grow taller. I was obsessed, but the centimeters were not coming in. Like, the craziest story I have of that was telling my little sister to tie me like spread off my bunk bed, and telling her not to untie. I think I read this somewhere. Crazy shit. But turns out growing taller is a luxury for your body. It's not a necessity. You don't have to be taller. It's more like, okay, we have a surplus, so unlock her ability to be tall, maybe to be 175 or something. But because I shifted environment during a very important part of my body's development, it was like, cancel that, because we need to get used to this climate, this language, this environment, this food, this, we're not doing, that's like an added stressor. It's kind of like how your hair doesn't grow, your nails break when you have deficiencies. So basically, we took us having to go to the doctor. I don't even know why we're there. I don't remember if it was particularly that. And my mom asked, like, she's having a hard time, she's not growing, what's happening? And the doctor explained that, well, this happens a lot with kids that move when they've started puberty. Like, it's really, their body just sees that as an extra, as a bonus, so it just cancels that. Would have saved me a lot of craziness if I heard that, because once I knew, I kind of accepted. I'm like, oh, okay, I think I need to accept that I'm not gonna get taller and there's nothing I can do. Then I wasn't doing anything crazy anymore. Like, it was so calming to me. It gave me peace of mind knowing that I wasn't gonna get any taller. And I feel like up until that point, like, it was the first thing I remember accepting about myself. I'm not getting taller. And then I remember also, like, with my dark skin, like, but when I came to Denmark, that wasn't a big issue because I wasn't being teased or discriminated because of how dark skinned I was. This is something I experienced more in South Africa because there's a lot of like colorism there. Like, I heard a lot of really like anti black sentiments, and before that I didn't know there was anything wrong with my skin color, or there were levels of acceptable skin color. And that was something I struggled a lot with growing up in South Africa. Now I love my dark color, and I love when it's summer and I've been in the sun and my color like reaches its peak. But when I was younger, I experienced a lot of things that made me feel like maybe I wouldn't be beautiful until my color changed. And I'm just saying all of this stuff like because when I thought I wanted to be taller, I was looking literally into surgery. Imagine I had a mom who maybe fed into that and be like, yeah, you should get taller, like, you're not gonna be a beautiful girl if you're this short. I had really bad acne for a long time. I looked into the options, but then like what scared me off with all of that was like, okay, you might have to take it forever, or it wreaks havoc on your body as soon as you stop. Like, there was all of this stuff, all like how to grow taller. There was surgery that you could have, but then you'd have scars for the rest of your life. How to get lighter, like there was like bleaching, but then I was scared of all this. Like, thank God that even though I researched stuff to the degree, I was also very cautious. I was like, oh, I don't like the consequence of that. Like, I remember even with my butt growing up in the era of Paris Hilton butts, my butt was doing too much, and I remember feeling like I need my butt to be smaller. Who would have predicted BBL era? None of us saw it coming, especially if you grew up in the West as a black girl. You never saw that coming. The best that it ever got was Beyonce and J-Lo being famous, and people like, ooh, their butt, and you're like, ooh, butts are okay now. But before that, we were all drowning in images of Paris Hilton in that one juicy couture. I don't even have to say, I think if you know, you know. If you have that image, you have that image in your head. And so my butt was doing too much. I started trying to get into running, all this stuff. Everything had a consequence that I didn't like. And then eventually, thank God, during the same time working on my inner beauty, working on my inner acceptance, healing myself. And the more I accepted about myself, the more things I healed, the more also I felt like, why do I need to change all of these things? But also, the more time passed. I used to not be able to go out in the summer without wearing like capri tights. I don't know if you guys remember that era, but it was an era. And I would wear them under my skirts or dresses, anything that was too short, or like jean skirts, because my body again decided to grow horizontal instead of vertical. And so like I got larger hips, I got like a larger butt, thighs, and what have you. And because of that, I had like stretch marks like at the back of my knees, and I felt very ashamed of that. Like, and then I felt very ashamed of the stretch marks around like my butt and around my hips. And so I did everything to hide that. But then like I remember also seeing people who would be outside without those capri tights and with stretch marks on their legs, and it made me feel better. I'm like, okay, so we can do that. It is okay. And to not see it as ugly, but just see my body needed more space. And so it made more space. And that's it. It says nothing about my value as a human being, my abilities as a human being. And slowly, like those things started to happen. Like I remember like even like with my face, like, okay, I had all this acne, but then understanding that acne was caused maybe about something internally. So then I was like, okay, it doesn't help to do all this tropical stuff. From a young age, at least, I've always liked to go for the rooted solution. Like, what can I do that just makes this never happen again? I was always team that. So that also saved me. I never liked like quick fixes too much or relied too much on them. Like, they gave some relief, but then it also backfired. And it's the same with the weight, because I used to do a lot of dieting when I was younger. Until at 17, like I remember reading, you need to have a lifestyle that's healthy, that keeps you fit. And I was like, oh, I love that most. So then I stopped dieting. All this I'm trying to say is, thank God I had all those journeys. I had the discomfort, I had the disdain, or even hate for a specific thing about myself. I allowed myself to look for solutions. I allowed myself to sit with that discomfort. I couldn't escape it anyway. And then I found maybe solutions and I didn't like the consequences, or I found ways of living with it, or I found the way to understand it better. Like when I understood I don't have pimples because my skin is trying to embarrass me and hates me. I have pimples because my body is trying to communicate with me. It's trying to tell me something. That was also life-changing. I have stretch marks because my body is needing more space and it's growing faster than it could keep up. So it created stretch marks. I am short because I left at a time when my body was like, okay, we need all we need to help you thrive and strive. And you don't need to be taller. You will be okay being as tall as a 12 EMA. Like once I started understanding the whys of certain things, like my body didn't look like my peers because I wasn't genetically from there. Like, and the people that I came from viewed the way that I looked as beautiful. I just was in the wrong place. I wasn't in the wrong body. And learning all of those things slowly like gave me wisdom that I could apply on more things, rather than if I had fixed those things. I'm like, okay, I hated my skin, so I bleached it. I hated having pimples, so I've thrown drugs at it. And not to judge anybody who feels like that, because I've also met people who needed to do that and they stopped and they were fine. But that just scared me. So I was like, I need to find a way to understand why it's happening so I can get it to the root. And that meant that I had like adult acne. I had acne beyond my teen years. And that was really humbling. But it made me understand how to care for myself internally. And as the years passed and my acne got better and better, I never want to talk too much about it because I never want to jinx it, because it traumatized me a lot when I was young. I was like, oh my God, I finally figured it out. A week later, everything is back. But I've been in a good streak for a long time. Knock on wood. But the thing is, even if it was to come, I've accepted it. So I'm not the same person I was 10 years ago or 20 years ago who felt like it could ruin my day, or ruin, like I can't look people in the eye, I can't go out because I feel so ashamed, like something bad was happening to me. I'm like, no, my body's communicating that something is off. Maybe the hormones are acting up. Maybe the skincare routine has to be improved. Like my body's just telling me something. That's it. And it's not an offense to the people looking at me, and it's not an offense against me from my body. The more I understood that everything my body does is in favor of me, in love of me, like my very dark skin, because of where I come from, and that is supposed to protect me. It's a huge disadvantage growing up in the north, but my ancestors couldn't have known that. Everything that I had issues with or society would try to turn against me was actually very purposeful. There's a reason, explanation for it. And one thing about me, if I understand something, I can approach it much differently. I'm less emotional towards it, and I'm more like, oh, okay, there's a reason for this. So if I understand the reasons, I can accept it better. Maybe it can give me a way to change that in a way that's more sustainable and more grounded from the root. And then like with my height, I accepted that as I got older. I'm like, you know what? Also because I went back home and I saw my aunties and I saw my grandma. They're also very tiny ladies. And I'm like, okay, maybe I could have been taller, because all my siblings are taller than me. Like it literally goes, the shortest is the oldest and the youngest is the tallest. So it's kind of like their genes had time to catch up and adapt, and then they got their full potential height, whatever. It's okay. I'm closer to the earth and I'm an earth baby, so it's fine. But then I also saw like all the cuteness that comes from being a short person. And I'm like, I don't mind being short. Actually, it's okay. I've accepted that I'm short, and I think it's adorable now. I think it's okay, from somebody who was like, I'm never going to be a real woman because I'm so short. And I'm like, there's different kinds of women. Some women are short women. And I just happen to be that. So there's a lot of things that I grew into my hair texture, like wanting to have certain curls, wanting to have straight hair, and then realizing the damage that was doing to my brain. And then realizing the reason we felt we needed to relax our hair, to feel like we, especially as Black women, that we were neat and we were more well, like our hair was difficult and we couldn't even be bothered to understand it. Just fix it with some heat, like kill the curls, kill the heritage and just assimilate, the more I understood that like everything I've healed about myself like kind of has healed a bigger thing, like understanding anti-blackness, understanding colorism, like it's all expanded the way I see the world, and it's all made me who I am today. And then today, like if I meet somebody who's like colorist, or who doesn't like short women, or who judges my skin for having acne scars, whatever, it doesn't affect me as much because I got to go through those things. I got to embrace them, understand them, and then embrace them at some point. I got to integrate this experience. I don't know who say that, but like you can't be shamed about something that you've already accepted about yourself. Like try again. It only works if you yourself feel that way. If you yourself feel like not being this size, or not looking this way, not being this tone makes me ugly. My baby's coming back. Huh? Right? I'm talking about accepting your ugly faces so that you can actually really like yourself when you get older, instead of just fixing everything and feeling like, right?
You have ugly faces?
You're so cute. Stop. Yeah, anyway, what was I saying? Okay, there's a lot of commotions, but I want to wrap this up as well. So basically what I'm trying to say is, let yourself cook. The fact that you allow yourself to accept your ugly face, even if you don't actually look ugly, but you feel ugly, because that's also like a lot of us are out here having body dysmorphia to some degree, but we are like, somebody thinks you're beautiful. Somebody always thinks you're beautiful. No, but like, I would change times, not the way I look, right? And I feel differently about myself because I had changed the thing that was causing me pain, my mind. We're in an era, or in a time of the world, where there is no space for you to question, why do I feel ugly? Why do I feel I need to make my nose look a certain way? Because I've seen, going back to all those Korean surgeries that black women are getting, I never see them saying, oh, I would like a wider, I would like a, it's always the same desire. Make my nose smaller. Why do you think your nose has to be smaller? You know, there's a reason. Or even when we were doing the makeup stuff, and the way that women would contour their nose, you're like, there's a reason you're doing it like that. It's not just, and then we're going to contour. There's a certain structure that we think is more beautiful, and a certain phenotype that comes from a certain context in our way of living, and comes from certain values of what is considered beautiful. So for me, the more I question those things, the more I question, why do I think that if my body looks like this, I feel more beautiful? If my skin tone is this way, I feel more beautiful. If I'm taller, I feel more beautiful. There's a lot of really short women in the world, but the ones maybe I was feeding myself from all the magazines, all the really tall women, or at least like average height, right? So all of this influences you and how you think about yourself, and learning to embrace and to even expose yourself to more people who look like you. Like when I saw the lady with the stretch marks behind her knees, and how it made me feel like maybe it's not that shameful to walk around like that. Nobody's gonna burn you at stake for walking around and having stretch marks on your body. So all of those things, like the more I questioned it, the more I exposed myself to people who look like me, more faces of people in public who had acne, but were not shying away from talking to people who still laughed and had a great time. Like, even all that to say is, I think we rob ourselves of that, or the new generation is being robbed of that, because everything is fixable. And sometimes the only things that I encourage you to fix are things that are going to make money for people. They're things that are going to take more power out of your hands, make you feel more dependent on certain things. If you love your face now because you've learned how to do makeup and you wear makeup, that's not a liberating realization, because it's also something that's going to mean it requires you to constantly do it to feel beautiful, right? Whereas if you learn to love yourself the way you are, and you learn to love the things that make you uniquely you, nobody can sell you that. And everything else maybe is to enhance or to highlight, but it's not because I feel more beautiful. I feel more worthy of being amongst people when I do this. Like practicing feeling all of those things without all of those things being done, without feeling like your body looks a certain way or your face looks a certain way. And I feel like had I fixed all of those things, it would have just started a very vicious circle that made me feel whenever I'm dissatisfied with something, I need to find a solution and fix it, rather than understand, why am I feeling dissatisfied about this? Why am I feeling like I love myself less because of this? Why am I... like questioning it and getting to a point where you realize a lot of the reasons, the problems you have are not really problems. It's your perspective that's the problem. And I think we're not encouraged to see things from that angle as much because it doesn't make anybody money. It's easier for people to say, you don't like that, I have a solution, because then they can sell you stuff, especially as women. And then you add like colonial mentality into it, you add Eurocentric values and aesthetics into it, and you have a pot of constantly having to chase your value and your beauty and it never belonging to you. All the things I felt very insecure about as a teen, today I fully embrace and love and either feel neutral about or celebrate, you know? And that is a great achievement. I've just changed my mind. I've grown. Who'd have thought getting older even helps? Like not being infused in teenage hormones also helps. So yeah, if you're younger, like let things simmer, like grow into your looks, grow into accepting who you are, grow into connecting to why you look the way you look. Especially for a lot of diaspora kids who grew up in the North or grew up in the West, look at bodies that look like your aunties, your cousins back home. Like, don't be so fixated on trying to mimic bodies that your genetic makeup wasn't made to look like. It's a recipe for disaster. I hope you allow yourself to grow into yourself, and that time is a beautiful thing, and to practice patience and practice applying different perspectives to the things you don't like about yourself or would like to change about yourself. And appreciating the fact that you're not here to fit in, you're here to understand how you can add to the world that we live in, even if it's how people can look, how tall people can be, what their hair can look like. That I didn't even get into the hair part, but basically you guys have followed my hair journey. By embracing things that came more natural to me, that were more aligned with my beauty, that were closer to my expression of beauty or the expression of beauty of my people in different ways. Like I always feel like that is the path of least resistance, like to look like the way you're supposed to look, at least be inspired by people who look like you. And my hair loves being locked because I'm working with something it naturally does. That's just a physical manifestation of learning to embrace yourself and work with who you are and how you look instead of against it. There's beauty in all the ways we show up as humans, and learning to love your kind, even aesthetically, like instead of trying to mimic and feel like it has to look a certain way because you're being brainwashed with the same face, the same body type, the same hair structure, or the same ideologies of what makes somebody beautiful. Like diversify that shit, you know? So anyway, guys, I just wanted to share that with you. I hope it's of benefit, and do share some of the things that maybe you didn't love growing up but you fully embrace now as an older person. Maybe a lot of younger women will read that and feel inspired to know that it gets better, and it gets better especially if you do the work so that you're grounded in it, knowing that, hey, there's a reason that my body looks like this. There's a reason that my body's showing up in this way, and I can take care of it. I can respect it, and I can see it as something that's working for me, not against me. Otherwise, I will see you in my next video. Do take care, and I hope you're blooming as you are, wherever you are. Bye, guys. Sofia, know that you and I shouldn't feel like a crime. I think we could do it.